Welcome to the Big Game Hunting Podcast, where we help hunters like you prepare for the big game hunting adventures you've always dreamed of. Now, here's your host, John McAdams.
Hello, John McAdams here. Welcome to episode 343 of the Big Game Hunting Podcast. Tyler Freel is back on the show today to talk about a recent moose hunt where he cleanly killed a nice bull with Hornady's new .22 Advanced Rifle Cartridge out of his AR-15. Now, I feel like I owe it to my audience to give them the best and most accurate information possible, and sometimes that involves presenting alternate viewpoints that may involve challenging previously held beliefs about what people think you quote-unquote need to hunt certain animals. This is one of those episodes. The same was also true for one of Tyler's previous appearances on the podcast with me in episode 282, where he talked about killing a grizzly bear with his 6.5 Creedmoor. You are, of course, welcome to disagree with us. All I ask is that you keep an open mind as Tyler and I discuss this hunt in detail. As you will discover shortly, the little .22 ARC delivered surprisingly good terminal performance on a big Alaskan bull moose, and we discuss why that was the case in great detail today. Now, before Tyler and I get started, I am giving away a set of Axle Tracker electronic earmuffs. This is a brand new, in-the-box set, literally identical to what I use at the range and sometimes out hunting. The tracker muffs provide hearing protection and hearing enhancement, so you can carry on a conversation with the person next to you at the range or hear the sounds of an approaching animal without exposing your ears to damage from gunshots or other loud noises. Sign up at thebiggamehuntingblog.com/giveaway or click the link in the show notes to be entered in a random drawing for those earmuffs. Be sure to confirm your email address if you are asked to do so after you sign up. You have until 11:59 p.m. Central Time on 1 December 2024 to sign up. I will randomly select one lucky listener from all the submissions on 2 December to receive those muffs. Okay, let's dive into things with Tyler and the moose he killed with the .22 ARC this year. Tyler, it is wonderful having you on the show again. Thank you so much for joining me back on the show today.
Yeah, you're welcome. It's good to see you again, John.
Like I mentioned to you before we started talking, I had heard in an interview between Joseph von Benedict and Seth Swerzik that Seth just kind of mentioned offhand that you killed a moose with a .22 ARC earlier this year, and that really got me thinking about the possibilities of the cartridge, because when it came out, I was not really impressed with it myself. But as it turns out, I didn't fully appreciate what was going on with it. I was like, they sold it with the 62 grain ELDVT. I was like, okay, that's great. Varmint bullet, blah, blah, blah. And then I shot it a little bit, and I shot some of the match rounds that they had for it. And, okay, fair enough. It did not even dawn on me to use that cartridge with any of those bullets on bigger game, but that was not the case with you. And so you made people's heads explode last year when you talked about killing the grizzly with the 6.5 Creedmoor. You probably made some more heads explode this year when you killed that moose with the .22 ARC. So we'll talk about that. But I guess first off, what made you decide, okay, I'm going to hunt moose with a .22 ARC this year?
The simple answer is it was next. It was next on the agenda. So my experience with the .22 ARC was kind of similar to what you described. When it came out, it's like, all right, cool new varmint round. And you look into how it kind of matches a lot of performance characteristics or exceeds them of the .22-250 in an AR platform. Like, I get that. And we wanted to make sure and test it and cover it. So I built, we kind of divided and conquered. We've got kind of a 2-man gun team at Outdoor Life, myself and our shooting editor, John Snow. And he got a proof bolt action .22 ARC, and brought that to our gun test. And then my job was to build a gas gun. I ended up building 2 gas guns. And they're really like, just DIY throw together yourself. One's basically a, arrow precision receiver set and ballistic advantage barrel. And another was more with Odinworks parts that I basically like just scavenged one of my kind of extra mil spec ARs that I had sitting in the gun safe. And so I built these two guns. They shot really well, kind of surprisingly well for just that level, that cost level of rifle.
Mm-hmm.
But what clicked for me was I was shooting the Hornady factory 75 grain ELDM black loads at 1,000 yards. And it's a good thing someone actually called me out on this, because I was seeing the same wind hold in like a 10 to 12 mile an hour wind at 1,000 yards as the 6.5 Creedmoor I was shooting with 140 grain CR Match Kings. Now, like, technically there probably was some slight variation in the wind, but I ended up using the same wind hold at 1,000 yards. Not to say that it matches, but it got my attention because I had, in the past, when I thought about using maybe a 22-250 for sheep, I think it would be a good sheep gun. You're just handicapped by the wind drift of 22 cal bullets. Same thing with like anything that'll fit in the AR magazine in a 223, 77s, TMKs or 77 SMKs. There's a reason why, shooting service rifle guys at the 600 yard line, you're single loading like 80 or 90 grain Match Kings because they do so much better in the wind. And that that turned the light bulb on for me. And I was like, huh. So, and I'm watching these bullets, like watching my trace all the way to the target, basically. So, and the recoil, when I talk about recoil in this context, it's not like recoil that's hurting you or recoil you can't shoot well with. Mm-hmm. But in a lightweight 6.5 Creedmoor, even, in an improvised position on the mountain, it still blows you out of your sight picture enough to where I usually can't see on cheap. I usually don't see my impacts. So the thought of building a 22 arc and a bolt gun immediately like caught my attention for using as a sheep gun. Mm-hmm. And just stop me if I end up going too far in any different the little rabbit trail, but just kind of the things I'm thinking about,
Sure.
Like, I'm looking at the bullet selection that's available, and really the like some of these new 22 cal bullets are what do 99% of the work of making these cartridges a thing or something I'm considering, because I like a 243 Winchester is an excellent sheep gun. It's excellent for a lot of stuff, black bears. And I would never hesitate to shoot a sheep or, a moose with a good 90 grain 243 bullet. Like, why would it bother me to shoot something with an 80 grain 22 bullet? And you can get into the lengths of like, they're actually longer. So you end up, the how the bullets actually work inside the animal is kind of a interesting factor compared to some of the shorter bullets, like in 25-06. Killed a bunch of stuff with 110s and 25-06. And those, especially loaded in a bolt gun, the, your drop and wind drift can even be better than 25-06, with a 110, which is a pretty typical factory load. And basically, you get better wind drift generally than most 243 stuff too. So those are all the things that are kind of bouncing around in my head. And the more I dug, the more I liked the idea. And that was in the summer, and I just I couldn't get a bolt rifle put together in time to take sheep hunting. So I started thinking of moose, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but like moose are not difficult to kill. And when you consider the context of how we're hunting them and the type of shots I usually get, I started thinking about it, but I also made sure and talked to Seth and Colton Bagnoli and some other like Tom Beckstrand, people who have shot stuff with some of these bullets, like and actually like asking that I want to know specifically, what does the bullet do? What kind of penetration, what kind of wound cavity, just to make sure. Because it is people think I'm kind of like just taking chances with some of this stuff. Like if I thought I was taking a chance, I wouldn't do it because I need that meat. Like that's my food. That's my food. So I did a bunch of research, and ultimately I still have kind of a nagging little gremlin on the shoulder, wondering like how well is it really going to work? But objectively looking at the evidence of what, other people have seen And frankly, a lot of people do kill moose with 223s every year. That's like, they might not talk about that a lot, but it happens. And so I was confident that it would work fine. So said, what the heck?
Well,
I'm not afraid to go against the grain sometimes.
No, you're clearly not. And it's also interesting what happens when you go against the grain, the things that you can discover doing that. Any big advance in any industry or any field or whatever, initially that person that makes that discovery is kind of considered a kook. And then, and sometimes they are a kook, but then sometimes it turns out, oh my gosh, this is a revolutionary development that we wouldn't have thought if you would have, we wouldn't have accomplished if,
well,
if
and I don't want people to think that I think of myself as like being revolutionary on this, because frankly, none of this is new.
No,
I mean, guys,
it's becoming more mainstream, but it is not new. You're right.
And some of it's a little cyclical, maybe. I mean, we don't know ultimately because, the centerfire cartridges have only been around for 100 and some odd years. But in the early 1900s, I mean, the first half of the 20th century, like lots of people were just waylaying stuff with small calibers, and for all the Magnum stuff, like, I mean, classic Jack O'Connor wrote a ton of stuff, wrote a lot of stories and columns about, advantages, some of the advantages of potentially of using medium-sized cartridges, smaller cartridges, a lot of the 25s. And, like I always plug it, my favorite book, Alaska's Wolfman, about a famous, market hunter and predator control guy here in Alaska that was basically from 1915 through 1955. He was out doing stuff, and he ultimately, had said that he thought that, basically thought that 220 Swift was like kind of the ultimate. He painted it as kind of the ultimate gun for hoofed game. Said nothing killed hoof game quicker than a lung shot from a 220 Swift. And he was using junky 48 grain bullets, at the time, that were just straight cup and core, nothing fancy. And, so that's just one example, but none of this stuff is really new. We went through the Magnum craze, and there's like big cartridges have their place too. But I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. I just kind of see specific advantages for a little cartridge like the 22 ARC, or you could put 22 Creedmoor in the same category. They're basically 200 yards difference of effective range and more powder. But I'm not trying to paint. Yeah, I just see advantages of them for sheep. For sheep hunting was my main thing, but deer size stuff, man, I think there could be some big advantages to them.
So I was one of the guys that kind of at the beginning of the year, I was like, I don't know, man, 22 cal, even on a deer, I'm open to have my mind changed on it, but I'm not sure, right? Surely you can do it, but is it a good idea and all of that stuff? And then, the 22 Creedmoor, I've really changed my tune on it this year after I've hunted with it a little bit. And, kind of like we talked about, the marketing for the 22 ARC just kind of set me off on the wrong track with it. I wasn't interested in it, but then, I started doing some work with it. I heard about your deal with it. Then now Hornady has that 80 grain ELDX out for it. That's, more designed and marketed for that use instead of the varmint bullet and the match bullets. But you were talking about the different weight bullets in the larger calibers. People misuse sectional density all the time. But it is an interesting way to compare the length of a bullet like that, length caliber, weight of a bullet across calibers, right? So a 130, 270 grain bullet, sectional density at 242, 110 grain, 25 cal, 238, let's see here, 87 grain, 6 millimeter, 210, and then you have the 88 grain, 22 cal is 251, right? So it's bigger than everything else we've talked about.
I want to say the sectional density of the 88 is roughly the same as a 180 30 cal bullet. But
you're probably right. Let me look it up here while we're talking, and we'll see. All right, 271. So it's a little lower, but close. Yeah. It's getting up there.
So, and another interesting thing about like misusing sectional density is, that sectional density changes the instant that bullet hits the animal. Like it's in a constant state of change. And one thing that I think like heavy for caliber bullets, and this kind of separate discussion that I still am feeling out is the tipped match bullet. It's a match bullet with a good expansion mechanism. Heavy for caliber stuff that's really long. And I first was kind of exposed to this because my in-laws, probably shot more than a dozen moose with this 338 Lapua. And I did all the hand loading for it. And I shot a moose with that gun too, but I was shooting 285 grain ELD match bullets. And the way, and it was actually Seth, one I was talking to a couple years ago, kind of wondered like, man, those 285 seem to do really well on moose, even at closer ranges. They are just like balled up mushroom. They're not exploding like people think match bullets will do. And he, it was the first person to explain to me that the length of that bullet, you have such a long column on that bullet as it's penetrating, it's continually expanding, and lead and stuff's kind of peeling back continuously. If you've got a short little 100 grain or 110 grain 25 cal bullet versus an 88 grain 22 cal bullet, like going the same speed, that 22 cal bullet's going to keep penetrating and expanding farther than I say farther. I need to be reluctant on saying definites, but if you get what I'm talking about, like those bullets that are longer have a longer column to continually expand. Especially if they're, a lead core. So I think there's some potential advantages to it, or it's not, people shouldn't write it off.
And until recently, when people thought 22 cal centerfire, you think 223, 22, 250, 220 Swift, and those are maxing out usually with a typical hunting bullet around 62, 64 grains, something like that.
Yep.
And then with a real small diameter bullet, you go up to 75, 80, 88 grain bullets. That makes that bullet a whole lot longer to fit it in. And there's a gigantic difference between an 80 grain ELDX and a 55 grain varmint bullet, which is what most people are picturing in their mind.
Yeah, they're thinking of people think of shooting coyotes with a VMAX bullet or a bullet nozzle ballistic tip, something like that. And it's like these bullets don't even go through coyotes half the time, and that that's understandable. That's what the image people have in their mind. But they are totally different bullets. Yeah. that will, I think, perform a lot more like a 243 or a 25 cal bullet than your traditional 22s.
Yeah, I think you're definitely right. And so for those that don't know what the heck we're talking about, 22 ARC released almost exactly a year ago by Hornady in October. Then they rolled it out the SHOT Show this year in 2024. 22 caliber cartridge designed for use in an AR-15, 2.26 long overall length, but it's descended from the 6.5 Grindle cartridge, so it has a fatter case, and so you can shoot that bullet pretty fast. But like a standard, one of their standard loads for it, 62 grain ELD VT at 3,300 feet per second, and then we got that 88 grain ELD match at 2820. So right, it's not your grandpa's 22 centerfire. You shot this out of tell us about your rig. You used an AR-15 on this hunt too, didn't you?
Yeah. So I used, it was my kind of arrow precision build. So arrow upper, lower, and handguard. And I think one of their bolts, an Odin Works, like bolt carrier or buffer, adjustable buffer, Odin adjustable gas block, and just like a Magpul PRS Lite or something stock. Just a real pretty basic build. Timney 2-stage trigger. And I can't get over the 2-stage for my service rifle days. So that 20-inch ballistic advantage, like light fluted DMR barrel, that barrel shot the 80s and 88s really well. And I was kind of waffling. So I found some of the 80 grain ELDXs. This is kind of like, there are not a lot of them available, and worked up a load that was shooting pretty well, I'd shoot, kind of accumulate 20 shot groups, and it was like under 1.5 inches, so pretty, totally adequate. And I'm waffling between the 80 grain ELDX and the factory 88 grain ELD match, and getting some feedback, talking to some people, like, we're really impressed with how the ELD match did too. I don't know that it was enough like data to say that that's better than the ELDX, or that really they're going to be very much different in actual performance. But I've been, there's a lot of talk that people are, hearing on the fringes and whatnot of how these tipped match bullets do on games. So with good feedback from it, I felt like, man, well, I kind of want to see what that does for myself. So I was confident it would be plenty. It would work plenty well enough, but I wanted to see like exactly what it would do. So I picked the 88 factory ammo, and it was I think $26.95 was my muzzle velocity out of that 20-inch barrel, and which we could get into in a little bit later too. But an advantage of the arc in a bolt rifle, especially if you get one of the mini actions to cut. So you could build like a stupid light bolt rifle, and you can load in a bolt gun. You can load that cartridge to another like 10,000 psi higher, because it's pressure rated for AR gas guns to not like tear lugs off and stuff. Like the 6.5 Grendel,
I think it's loaded to like 52,000 psi in factory ammo, and you can get it up to over 60 in a bolt gun.
Yeah,
and especially you put a longer barrel on it, and you can get that thing going quite a bit faster.
Yeah, I think I'm still waiting on my. I've got an action that's getting a barrel spun up for it, but to build like a lightweight sheep hunting rifle, and I think you should be able to get like in the 2,900 range with the 88s, and probably and faster than 3,000 with the 80s. I bet. Really, you're only like a couple hundred feet per second slower than the Creedmoor at bolt gun pressures. Gas gun's a little different story. So you kind of got to consider those, and you're not going to be able to buy that high pressure factory ammo either. So yeah, something to think about. But I just can't help but nerd out on all this stuff. So I was pretty excited.
It's interesting, all the levers that you can pull with it too. Because I have a full Odin Works upper in 22 arc. 18-inch barrel, and I was getting 27-18 from it with the 88 grains. Yours is going a little bit slower, even with a 20-inch barrel, though. It's interesting the variation you can get sometimes.
Yeah, for sure. And like I saw, it seemed like what was I saying? I was seeing about 75 feet per second difference going, because my ballistic advantage one's at 20 and my Odin barrel's 18. And so it's about 75 feet per second difference. And then it's like 130 feet per second off a box velocity for like 24-inch barrel.
So you got this AR-15. You're going to go hunt a moose with it. You've done a lot of research. You're feeling pretty good going into the hunt. Tell us about how things actually went down.
Well, moose hunt. The whole thing about moose hunt is it's super boring and like, until it's not. I mean, we really enjoy it. My hunting partner and I. So we go out there and we basically just call from the terrain kind of dictates that we call from the same spot every day. It's something like 4 hours in the morning, 4 hours in the afternoon, evening. Is typically what we do. And so it's a lot of calling, and we alternate who shoots first each year. So he was up first this year, and after maybe like 5 days, I think, 5 days of hunting, or 4.5 day, whatever. He shot a really big bull, and it was, it was pouring rain, and I'm kind of calling periodically, and then all of a sudden there's a bull there and he shoots it. So, then it was my turn, and it was a few more days, I think like 3 or 4 more days, and sitting there in the evening, and it was just starting to be when moose would be moving around, and I was glassing the one spot that we can actually glass a ways. I was watching a couple cows, and he had climbed up in this. We hunt out of this elevated platform because the brush is so tall around there, you can't see anything. And so he climbs up and sat down. It was like the first nice evening in a while. We had really just crummy weather, and I'm looking at cows. He said, "Oh shoot, there's a bull right there." And I looked over to the right, and a bull had shown up and standing there, about 170, 180 yards looking at us. And then he walks behind as we're kind of getting settled, getting oriented to him. He walks behind a little stand of trees, and my buddy goes down and does a little call in, and the bull, I think he had kind of winded us or something. Like sometimes they just don't, don't want to cooperate. And he stood there for quite a while. And instead of just coming on a string like they do sometimes, he just had decided he was going to keep going. And in that time, my buddy had grabbed the video camera and come back up and sat there. But he's walking basically perpendicular to us, so broadside, through this finger of brush. And I can tell he's not going to come. He's just going to go on his way. And I had kind of a window where he was visible. And so I'm frantically like picking through there because the brush is pretty tall. And I ended up finding a window, like, I don't remember how big it was, but it was like a comfortable window that I could shoot through that he was walking through. And basically I let him step into that and touch the shot off. And it normally, well, I say normally, it's like half the time they run a little ways and half the time they just kind of seize up and stand there. And his hind end dropped and he jumps and kind of takes off running, quartering away. And, I guess instinct took over or whatever, but I shot again and heard the bullet hit him the first time, shot again. And that one hit him right in the middle of the hind quarter, like the meatiest part of the hind quarter, unfortunately. And then I hit him one more time right as he stopped. And then he was stood there for, I don't know how many, 25, 30 seconds and fell over, kind of like normal moose kill. And yeah, I mean, all three shots were in about 5 seconds. So it happened quick. And, yeah, that's how it went down. It was really pretty uneventful. If I made a mistake in all of it, it was shooting more than once because the first shot was all I needed, but you never do know.
So about how far was he when you took that first shot?
About 170 yards.
Okay. Yeah. So I'm running the math here. So you got an impact velocity of around 2,500 feet per second, something like that.
That's what I figured it was.
Yeah. And so he was close to broadside for that first shot?
Totally broadside, yeah.
Did you hit him on the shoulder or behiing the shoulder?
Behind the shoulder. I always shoot him. I mean, moose's lungs are so big, like there's just not I don't rarely ever have a reason to shoot him in the shoulder. I don't like ruining any meat, which is why I was got pretty disappointed in myself for having that follow-up shot hit him in the hind quarter.
Yeah, I've killed exactly one moose. I killed a Calcharis moose this year, and like the way things went down with her were not that different from what you just described.
Yeah.
Shot her, ran 10 yards, stopped, shot her again. She fell down, got up, fell over, and that was it. So 30 seconds after the first shot, she was down. And from everything I've heard from people like you and other people that have hunted more moose than me is they're not really difficult to kill, but they're really difficult to like bring down instantly.
Yeah.
Usually they are on their feet for 30 seconds or whatever afterwards, and that's the end of it.
Yeah.
So let's talk in a little bit more detail how these bullets actually performed when they hit the moose, what sort of damage they did to his vitals, all that stuff.
Yeah. No, so the first shot, and I mean, this boils down to what I was ultimately wanting to see. Like, this was my whole reason for shooting a moose with it, because I want to see what it does with, other stuff I really want to hunt with it in mind. So the first shot, kind of low lungs, hit right in the middle of a rib, which a moose rib is like significantly thicker than the thickest deer scapula on the planet. Punched about a nickel-sized hole through the rib, and then blew like one of the lower was flipping the lungs around, like the near side where it hit, it just kind of like tore like that portion of the lung lobe off, I guess. There was just kind of a big ragged like semicircle out of that lung, and then between the lungs, the hole was about the size of baseball, or 3 to 4 inch hole, like right between the lungs. And then that bullet terminated somewhere in the offside lung. So, I mean, that was enough right there he probably wouldn't have stayed on his feet any longer than he did. But, the second shot, which it was for a shot that's not ideal, or, it was interesting to see, because a lot of the kind of counter arguments to using smaller stuff. So, well, what if you hit bone, or, is that bullet going to just explode like an AR-500 plate on the shoulder or something like that? And so that bullet, and this is an 88 grain ELD match bullet, hit him about an inch in. I ended up, because I was wanting to make sure and you find the bullet if I could, but also like dissect and make sure there was no bullet in the meat, and cut. So I cut this thing apart in cross sections as I was butchering the moose, and it went after about an inch in. It went, that's also the thickest hide on the moose too. So went in, and it put about like racquetball sized wound channel through 10 inches of meat, and then totally exploded the top of the femur, and the top of the moose, where the femur ball is, and then there's another knob that kind of comes out that all these muscles attach to. I mean, like that femur's like that big around right there, like 3 inches around, and it was in I got a picture of all the pieces. It was in a bunch of pieces, and then the bullet, I never found the bullet. The bullet must have gone like through there into the body cavity. When I was yanking his guts, I'd noticed there was like an excessive amount of blood, like in his kind of around his tenderloins and stuff. I never found any damage there, but the bullet ended up somewhere in there. So, I mean, going through that whole moose quarter, I mean, you're talking like, I don't know, to where I could not find the bullet anymore, 16 inches of penetration, also, while blowing up a huge femur bone. And I never found a piece of jacket even, which really surprised me. So that was the second shot. And the third shot, I'm 99% sure hit a twig, and actually I got the bullet right up here if I can feel it. Pretty sure it hit a twig and tumbled, because the first shot I had a clear window, second shot I shot, and the third shot I just shot, and it's real brushy. So the second shot impacted like one rib over, like 2 inches away from the first shot on the edge of a rib, and the entry hole was much bigger, like maybe a quarter sized, and the rear, and it was kind of that shot was more quartering away too. So that tore off, like, I mean, the gash in the lung is like maybe 6 inches long on the near side lung. And then it exited the opposite lung about the size of a golf ball or a little bigger. And then ended up being against the scapula in the offside bullet. I'm sure this bullet hit a twig and tumbled because it didn't open at all, and it's all flattened out. I was kind of like WTF, man, when I saw that, but that after like actually thinking through and seeing the big entry hole, that's guarantee what happened. So even like tumbling, like worst case scenario, keyholing into the moose, it still went all the way through the moose.
That is interesting that the one that hit sideways, presumably sideways, was in better shape. You're able to recover that one, and you didn't find any pieces at all. The one that went in conventionally. Yeah,
and I didn't like dig through the lung, but we got a lot of work. I always have some of those regrets after dealing with a moose, but I'm like, man, we got a lot of work to do, and so I didn't dig around too far to try and find the bullet. But it did. The first bullet did not exit the rib cage, and the third bullet did, and that's the one I found.
That is so interesting that the bullet did not even exit the rib cage. It went in fine, it tore up the lungs, but like the lungs themselves don't provide that much resistance.
Yeah, not a ton, but I mean, you're still like, you're talking about a moose, like you're still talking, I mean, that's probably 16 to 20 inches of penetration on, a bullet that's just continually expanding as it goes. So I wasn't real surprised. Like, I mean, it was an impressive amount of damage for what it was. I wasn't like shocked by it, but I was like, yeah, could carry that. You consider that with smaller animals, it's going to be pretty devastating. And I mean, seen some, been sent some pictures of those 88s shooting antelope, and literally like the exit through the rib cage is 3 inches in diameter, exiting. So it's like it's a pretty formidable bullet. And I think it does a lot more damage than some people give it credit for.
It is interesting. All right, let's talk about the second shot a little bit more. So you said it hit it at kind of an angle, went through a bunch of the meat, then hit the femur, and then went just a little bit farther.
Yep. Yeah,
that is very interesting.
It ended up somewhere in the rear portion of the body cavity. is the only thing. Cause I literally, like we left nothing in the field, and I brought all that stuff back and cut up all the backbone, tenderloins, and I traced the bullet path as best as I could, and I could never find it.
Yeah, that's the thing. When it goes into the guts, man, you almost need a metal detector if you have any hope of finding the darn thing on a big animal like that.
I'm not that dedicated.
Yeah, that's some serious work getting after it like that. And a lot of people feel the same way about it. So that is all very interesting. So you're talking about, like we said, 2,500 foot per second impact velocity. So not super fast, but you got very impressive wound channels and surprising to some people amount of penetration, right? In each case, penetration was adequate. And especially with the 2 shots you hit in the chest cavity, you tore up the lungs real bad, and then that was it, right?
Yeah.
Was this one of those cases, kind of like the Creedmoor with the grizzly bear, that just based on the reaction of the animal and all that, how long it was on his feet afterwards, there wasn't a big difference between the 22 arc and a 308 or a 30-06 or something on it?
Yeah, I mean, as far as time to death, no. Like, I literally have a video of my buddies shooting his moose from this year. Not my hunting partner, but another buddy, with, 100 yards right through both lungs with a 300 PRC with the 212 ELDXs. The only reason he didn't shoot him again is because he could see the steam pumping, where the steam was pumping out from. And I mean, that bull was on his feet twice as long as this one. I mean, sometimes it happens like that. But anytime in that like few seconds to a minute and a half time frame, they just like take a while. Like the bull I shot, this bull I shot with a 22 arc was on his feet no longer than the bull I shot last year with a 300 H&H twice right through both lungs. I mean, that's how they die. Now, it's not a 20, that 22 arc is not doing as much damage as a similar bullet in a 30 cal, in a big 30 cal. And that's where it gets kind of hairy. It's like, a bigger cartridge generally can do, with the same bullet will do more damage, and theoretically will kill quicker usually, but that's like, except when it's like chemistry. It's like, this is the rule, except when it's not.
And this is also a good example too of how everyone loves talking about caliber. I love talking about caliber and cartridge and this one and that one and that sort of thing. But this is a great example of how the bullet itself is such a vital part of the equation. You take a 62 grain ELDX, or excuse me, not ELDX, ELD-VT, very, very different bullet from the 88 grain ELD match. Very, very different from, say, a 300 Win Mag with a Barnes bullet or something like that in it. That'll penetrate a lot better, but your wound cavity will be less on the 300 Win Mag than it would have been with an ELDX or a match. I'm not sure how it would compare to an ARC with a match bullet.
We'll see. And this is one of my like dream projects. If I only had $1 billion, I could, because I frankly, I don't think anybody, at least that's publicly accessible, I don't think anybody has actually taken, I want to take like a suite of calibers with a suite of bullets and like even just, shoot them all in the same medium. And it's not and people like to oversimplify shooting them in medium just to see, like, relatively speaking, because I have seen, just this year is, shooting a mono, like it's a Hornady GMX, like their older kind of Barnes style bullets, in a 338 Win Mag. Like I shot in which a 225 GMX or CX and a 338 Win Mag basically loaded the red line. No one is going to ever argue that that's not enough performance or not enough gun for any North American animal. Like it's just silly. No one's going to make that case. I ended up follow up shooting a black bear, didn't even knock it down, just flinched and ran off. Go there, and it's got just like a nice, neat, it has a wound channel through it, but it's like a nice, neat little hole, followed by 2 black bears I shot with a 6.5 Creedmoor with 143 ELDXs at similar range. Actually closer ranges. So, but we're talking 15 to 50 yards for everything. And the damage was way, way more devastating with those, just by like skinning and dissecting. Not to say that it's a more powerful round, because it's not, but that bullet construction makes a big difference in what a cartridge will or won't do. And I think a lot of people shooting some of the magnums, I think it was Ryan Avery actually put it to me. He calls it neutering your magnum, depending on what you want. Cause I've killed a lot of stuff with like TSXs, and I think they're excellent bullets for like when you know their capabilities, you know your velocities, and you know kind of what's going on, which is important for any bullet, but they don't make as big a wound channels as lead core bullets. And there's sometimes a big cartridge with that bullet will maybe only equal a smaller cartridge with a lead core bullet, or, this or that given bullet. It all kind of depends.
It really does. With the experimentation I've kind of done on my end over the last couple of years, I've really noticed that bullet diameter does not matter as much as you would think it would with an expanding bullet like that. You're shooting a solid or something like that into a Cape Buffalo or whatever, yeah. I mean, there's a big difference between a 4.58 and a 3.75. But man, like you said, you shoot two different expanding bullets and two different calibers. 300 Win Mag with a Barnes makes a pretty wide wound channel with a high impact velocity, but it's not as much as you would think for the amount of energy that it has compared to, say, a 223 with a much softer bullet.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just, you got to take it bullet, your cartridge almost doesn't matter at all. It's, you look at the bullet you're using and the velocity it's impacting at, are going to have a much more dramatic effect than whatever the cartridge is.
Now, in this case, you're shooting just about the heaviest bullet that you could have shot in the 22 arc, especially with the factory load at the time. And it was going not that fast, out of an AR and all that. And, it slowed down a little bit by the time you made it out there. Now you're making me wonder what it would be like, say you take that 88 grain ELD match, you jack it up to the max you can in a bolt gun, shoot it out of a 24-inch barrel, you shoot that same moose at 50 yards with it. So you have a impact velocity that's 400 feet per second faster. You'll get certainly probably more rapid expansion off of it, probably less penetration. It's just a matter of what degree we're talking about here.
Yeah. Yeah. How much, given what I saw, I think like the bullet's not, it's a long enough bullet. It's not just going to like people think they're just going to vaporize and turn to dust when they hit something. It's just not thing. Same thing with even like, I don't want to shoot a moose in the shoulder. If I had shot that moose in the shoulder with that setup, like it would have punched through. Like I'm not worried about it, but and honestly, like with that, in choosing that 88, the velocity is something I considered too. Cause I'm at like not real fast. I want it above 2,000 feet per second, but like it's such a long bullet at 24, 25, like it's not going to violently explode. And it didn't. I think if I was shooting like something real, like expected impact velocities over 3,000, I probably would shoot like the ELDX, which has a much thicker. The 80 grain ELDX was designed for 22 Creedmoor, and it has a much thicker jacket than the ELDM, which they always do, but it's more significant. So I don't know. There's a lot of ways to overthink it too, and I think ultimately, guys are seeing really good results with the 22 Creedmoor too on a lot of stuff. So
the experimentation I've done shooting, say, ELDX versus an ELD match, you get more expansion out of the match and less penetration, but it's like 10 or 20% less penetration.
Yeah, like how much?
Yeah. It's still more than you would think. And I've never seen one blow up, quote unquote, blow up on anything. Yeah. I keep hearing these stories, and I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Have you ever experienced that yourself, where you got significantly less penetration out of any bullet than you expected?
I never have. And the ELDX is a good example. Because I've shot a ton of stuff with not only 6.5s, but I shot them in 300 Win Mags, 30-06, 270. I've shot a lot of ELDXs and a lot of stuff with them, and they always seem to do pretty good to me. And ultimately, I don't really care what the bullet looks like at the end of the day. If it did like more than enough damage to kill the animal quickly, that's all I'm really looking for. A lot of times ELDXs on the backside, they'll get caught and you'll see, you'll have a jacket core separation, but that's like after the damage is already done. And even, even like my son, he shot a black bear this spring with a 6.5 Creedmoor and 140 ELDM. And I mean, the thing blew a hole the size of a baseball out the backside. And we actually like dug the jacket out of the ground. And it's like, because the core is not with the jacket, like that jacket doesn't have enough mass to blow through like that. Like the lead was blowing through too. And that bullet's touching a lot more tissue and cutting and damaging a lot more stuff. And I guess the way I look at it a lot, and because I have bow hunted a little bit, I don't really expect, and people's expectations are kind of come into play when you're talking about rifle cartridges. Like I don't really expect an animal to drop in its tracks when I shoot them. And I don't typically shoot them for like a high shoulder spine type of deal. And I typically just shoot them through the lungs like you would with a bow, and they die really fast every time. And the way I think about it is like, what's enough damage? If I can get a rifle cartridge, well, like this 22 ARC, for example, because my classic comeback to people who are saying it's marginal or saying it's not enough, is like, you must not think that bows and arrows work. Because your average, and some people have wacky ideas about how how archery equipment works too. All this stuff is ultimately killing the animal through blood loss from tissue damage. They impart the tissue damage a little differently, but your average like 1.25 inch broadhead kills stuff very, very quickly. And if I'd shot the same wound path with that on that moose with the broadheads I use, I would have, I think I even calculated, it's like and you consider it a cylinder through the moose, not a slit like it is. You've got like 22 cubic inches of tissue that's being disrupted. Whereas that particular bullet wound that I observed, the first shot was like 78 cubic inches of and I'm really getting in the weeds sometimes.
I love getting into the weeds, and people that listen to this love getting into the weeds. So with all of this, right, to kill an animal, you need a couple things, right? You need to put that bullet where it needs to go. The bullet needs to penetrate deep enough to affect some sort of vital organ in there. And then if you get some expansion and disruption off of it as well, that's a big bonus.
Yep.
And the thing, well, let's address a couple of potential objections people would have to this. So first thing, I hear all the time whenever I talk about 22 cal stuff, people are like, oh, well, 22 cals aren't legal to hunt deer. Well, they are some places and they're not in others. Colorado, you need 6mm to hunt big game. I'm assuming, since you did this and are telling the world about it, a 22 centerfire is legal for big game in Alaska then.
Yep. Technically even 20, like a 204 or a 17 Hornet would technically, I think, I should know this off the top, but I think it's just centerfire.
Okay.
And I don't recall. Yeah.
All right. So that's the rule in Texas.
It's never like come to that for me, but, and I hear this too. And people use the argument that, well, they make these laws for a reason. And it's like, yeah, they do, but are there no laws on the books that you think are pretty messed up or were made like with maybe not all the knowledge or, and a lot of these bullets for the 22 are pretty new on the scene. And like the commissions and agencies that make a lot of these game laws, they're just doing the best they can with the information they have. And we can, we do continually make efforts to like refine some of our regulations so that we can do better at that. But, like to me, that's not, like if it's not legal, you can't use it. But to me, that's not a moral or like efficacy type argument. That's just kind of it's illegal here. So, all right. It doesn't mean that it should, can't or shouldn't be used.
And I think in many cases too, those laws are often maybe a hangover from something 50 or 100 years ago when the situation was very different. But in any case, it's legal in Alaska. It's legal in Texas, right? You just have to have a center fire cartridge to hunt big game with here as well. But in other places, that's not the case. So your mileage may vary with that. The other objection that I think some people would have to it is the bullet, quote unquote, blowing up. And that will happen with some bullets, like a varmint bullet, and not with others. And so I think if you're going to go this route, you need to be using a very heavy for caliber projectile like you did. The 80 grain ELDX probably be another good choice. I've killed some stuff with the 22 Creedmoor this year, everything with the 80 grain ELDX, and I was happy with how that performed. I haven't killed anything with the match bullet at all myself. I've shot it. I've experimented with it. I'm curious about it, but I haven't actually done it.
What kind of entries or exits and wound channels have you been seeing
with the 80 grain ELDX? Yeah. So I've killed 2 hogs and a deer with it. I shot, and all of them have been pretty close. I shot the deer at just over 100 yards. And in all of these cases, I'm shooting it out of a rifle with a 24-inch barrel. So I'm getting, and like with the silencer attached, I'm measuring like an honest 3,300 feet per second. So it's screaming out of there. The deer I shot, it's a little over 100 yards away. Small buck. He was close to broadside, had his near leg forward. So I shot him right in the crease behind the shoulder. Left a big entrance wound in the ribs there. Massive bloodshot meat all around the ribs. Actually, even kind of got onto the shoulder, even though I didn't hit the shoulder. Just eviscerated his lungs, almost destroyed the first half of both lungs. Exited the outside shoulder. It was a real small exit wound, but it did indeed exit in that case. It dropped in his tracks, just like that. 2 hogs I shot. One was pretty small. They were together. There were 3 of them there, and I shot 2 of them. Shot the big one first. He was about 175 pounds. Shot him in the head, and that bullet, or shot him in the neck, rather, where I like to shoot him. That bullet went in the hide, through that big meaty neck that hogs have, through his vertebrae, exited the other side, and just dropped in his tracks like that. So it punched through bone and through that thick hide and muscle. It was maybe, 8-10 inches of penetration total to get through him. The smaller hog I shot in the shoulder. The smallest animal actually ran the farthest afterwards. It went about 5 yards and then tipped over. In that case, it had a real big, not a super big, but like maybe a silver dollar size exit wound on the offside shoulder. I shot it behind the shoulders in both cases, but it didn't, real frothy, bubbly blood coming out of that. But it did a lot of damage in each case. In each case, they all exited. And I even shot that big hog again on the ground because he was still kicking a little bit. And so I kind of ran up to him and I shot him in the chest under him. And it was at an angle, hit him in the sternum. And the shot exited out the offside shoulder plate through the gristle there, where everyone talks about the shield, quote unquote, that big hogs like that have. So even at real close range, I was getting very good penetration, and I was getting just ridiculous wound channels out of this stuff. So enough penetration, and it was doing lots and lots of damage to these animals.
No, that's really cool. Well, especially at that point blank, and I've never killed a hog. Hopefully here real soon I'll get a chance. But I don't know, from what you'd read and see and look on videos, I mean, like a gristle plate and scapula of a hog, I mean, cut up just like farm pigs, like their scapulas are heavier duty than a deer, or even like they're thicker than what most of a moose scapula is. They're not very thick. And at that, even at that velocity, to see it like blow through, I mean, that stuff, if anything, is like bullet crushing, bullet crushing material, but it's heavy duty stuff. And I think there's people that are really, they think some of the people that are shooting stuff with some of these 22s are making stuff up, when really it's like, look at what it does. Like, get this idea, just forget all your preconceptions and just like look at what it does. And is it enough or isn't it? Is kind of the way I try to look at things.
And so I've compared like what I've observed with the 22 Creedmoor to what I've observed with the 223 and the 22-250 shooting like deer hunting ammo, like a 64 grain Winchester PowerPoint. So not a varmint bullet, but like about as good as it gets as far as what you can find in a factory, quote, like purpose built designed for, marketed for hunting ammo.
Yeah.
And it penetrates deeper. The Creedmoor penetrates deeper, and it makes a bigger wound track than those bullets.
Mm-hmm.
Other bullets from almost anything else I've ever shot have certainly penetrated deeper than the Creedmoor. But what I have seen from the Creedmoor, at least on these deer and hogs I've seen with my own eyes, penetration has been enough. And as long as you're getting enough penetration to reach the vitals, what does another 6 inches get you?
Yep. Yeah. This boils down to a lot of people's equipment, and in this case, caliber cartridge selection.
Mm-hmm.
I think people get it's attractive because you can buy it.
Mm-hmm.
And people like to buy things they think gives them an advantage, or they may pick their cartridge, like spend a lot of the, I don't know how you would quantify it, but like if you had a jar full of of water, and that's the amount of thought you're putting into selecting your cartridge, you're spending almost all of it thinking about things that are like very rare occurrences.
Mm-hmm.
Or that might not happen, or decisions that you probably really shouldn't shoot anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Rather than we're just classic example of overthinking rather than just, thoughtfully picking something that works. And that you can shoot well. Ultimately, I mean, yeah, if you want to pick a big caliber and you can shoot it really well, that's awesome. It doesn't hurt anything. It doesn't hurt you, and it can give you some advantages. But there are also advantages to shooting some smaller stuff. And I mean, I guess I get kind of labeled as the small caliber advocate because I kind of like them, and
mm-hmm.
I think they have certain advantages, but it's always more complicated than that. Which caliber should I choose? It's like, how long is a piece of string? I heard that one from a New Zealander not long ago. I was like, that's really a good way to look at it.
Now, so here's another, and probably the final objection I'll give you on part of someone that would be sharpshooting us here. You get to hunt moose every year, and you are primarily hunting them for the meat, and so it's not as big of an occurrence as it is be some guy writing a giant check to go up there to hunt in Alaska, big bull moose. That's going to be the only time he ever does it, and he is certainly concerned about the meat, but it's not his primary focus with this. And so let's say I go up to Alaska next year. I'm on a big guided hunt. And I get a shot at a really big moose, and I'm only getting a last day of the hunt, strongly quartering 2-shot on this moose. I have to either punch through that shoulder blade at the thickest part of it, potentially at the knuckle like that, then go through the ribs afterwards. So you need more penetration. And I have to take either that shot or I take nothing. Is that something that you would use a 22 arc for? Or do you think, say, a guy like me that's coming up there, I should be hunting with something different?
I would say just take a 308
mm-hmm.
or a 6.5 PRC with like an ELDX even, or if you feel like you want to use a mono metal bullet that'll penetrate better,
mm-hmm.
like that's like you're not at any disadvantage using that. And I guess I think it's interesting cover, like the moose is just the medium for this 22 arc thing. My real interest is for like sheep primarily, but like I wouldn't hesitate to shoot a caribou, or like I think it'd be a really, really good black bear gun. Like it would be, I think a 6.5 Creedmoor small for a grizzly. Like I under like good circumstances, well, that's even a little vague, but under any circumstances, I would shoot a grizzly. Really, like a 22 arc would kill a grizzly just fine too. That's not really the point. I wouldn't, and I'd say this kind of the video we put out on it. Like I don't recommend the 22. Like I don't recommend someone go pick the 22 arc for moose. Just not because it doesn't work, but it doesn't give you any. And in most moose hunting scenarios, it doesn't give you an advantage over other like mild recoil. Even a 6.5 Creedmoor will kill moose totally fine. Thinking about your bullet, paying attention to your impact velocities, and like just like choosing your shots ethically and taking the time to be really comfortable shooting from whatever like field positions or whatever you're going to do. I think all these other factors matter way more than the caliber you use. And just like the boring old 308 will kill moose just as good as anything. If you're, if I, we can, and ultimately, like, we can make up any scenario in our head that would discount just about any cartridge. Like if I'm gonna be, like, and thinking about when I'm evaluating whether I wanted to use the 22 arc, I'm thinking, all right, how we moose hunt, we're shooting out of an elevated stand with a good rest and at 200 yards or less. Most of the moose we shoot are like 100 yards or less, like really easy. And sometimes you don't get a shot. Sometimes the animal just wins. We had a couple bulls come by us when my buddy was up in the stand that they came by less than 100 yards. It was super foggy. And the only times they were close enough to see them through the fog, they were in real thick brush and you just couldn't see them. I mean, some people, well, if you have a 45-70, you can just shoot right through the brush. Like, well, that's like not. Sometimes the best decision is not to shoot, and sometimes a lot of times you get another opportunity. Sometimes you don't. That's just how hunting is. But for someone coming up, like going on a once in a lifetime type hunt, I would say just like if you're really comfortable with your 338 rum or whatever the case may be, use that. But you need, I wouldn't like upgrade your caliber. If you're shooting a 30-06 for deer and you kill everything with it, like just bring that moose hunting. You don't need something bigger that's going to typically, the average person is just going to shoot a larger. If they move up to a larger caliber, they're going to shoot it worse. And
yeah, I mean that's the thing we've been dancing around. Is the recoil.
If you, I mean, you shoot a moose and you hit a moose in the guts, like with a 22 arc with a 375. Like the result is probably not going to be much different. Like you're going to have to shoot them again and they're not going to go far. You shoot them in the leg with like the same difference. Like there's a larger caliber with the same bullet will do more damage and maybe give you a bit more forgiveness on your own error. But I think that's kind of a fallacy that people like to use and kind of gives them a false confidence that, well, I'm just using a big enough gun that it doesn't really matter. But it does matter.
Yeah.
So, I mean, like shot placement and knowing your bullet selection and impact velocity, I think is everything, and not trying to push beyond what you should really be doing anyway.
So I shot my moose this year with the 7 PRC 170 grain terminal ascent, and I was getting, I think, 2950 at the muzzle with it. And so a little over 100 yards, a little bit closer than you. I think it was like 130 yards, something like that. Yep. It was still going really fast. And shot her in the shoulder, behind the shoulder. And she turned and ran 10 yards, stopped. Same shoulder presented to me again, shot again. And so I hit like within 2 inches of her on the same shoulder, but the bullets kind of crossed in there due to the angle that she was at. So one exited the front of the lung. On the other side, one exited the rear. I had like a softball-sized hole in her near-sized lung, and then wounds maybe a little smaller than a baseball on the offside lungs. And so it was massive, massive damage. And so it sounds like it did more damage, which you would expect than the 22 arc. Yep. But once again, the end result was not very different.
Yeah. Yep. And, like the huge bull my buddy shot with his 308 was with Lehigh Defense 175 grain to control chaos, which is like a different type of mono that behaves a lot more like a lead core, just very violent expansion and pedals shear off. That thing, I mean, it's like a 175 and a 308. Like it's not, I don't remember. I loaded them for him. I don't remember what velocity were, but they're not going fast. And that, that thing right in the middle of the lungs, it was like a hole the size of a grapefruit or bigger. I mean, really? It was impressive. Wow. And I've been shooting I shot my moose last year with the same bullets and a 300 H&H, and they did like really good. Those bullets seem to shoot really well for me, and I've been kind of accumulating more bodies with them to see what they do. That's kind of a side deal, but yeah, with moose, like once you have enough damage to the lungs, like they're going to die, and you can't really predict exactly how fast. I would be more hesitant for sure on flightier animals that I really want to blood trail. Like a moose typically just doesn't take off sprinting until they fall on their face. Like an elk or something might. And I can't really talk about elk because I've only killed one of them. But that was I shot it with a 300 Win Mag with a 180 Barnes, and first shot I didn't even know it was hit. It just took off running and hit it again the second time. Both shot, I mean, they were about that far apart in the lungs. I can't. Elk's not really my strong point. But
so now that you have a successful hunt under your belt with the 22 ARC, are you happy enough with it? You're taking it sheep hunting, and if so, are you going with a bolt gun, like an ultralight bolt action rifle?
Yeah, I'm planning on taking a sheep hunting next year, and hopefully, kill some bears with it in the spring. I have I don't know how ultralight it's going to be, but it should be a real light bolt rifle. I'm building on Origin Action. And either 20 or 22. I can't remember what I told them, but we'll put a lightweight can on there and should be able to just push those things either the 80s or the 88s, just screaming out of there. And I have some, like, frankly, I want to shoot some stuff with like a 77 grain Barnes LRX, which the 77s that are, and especially stuff like the TMKs and whatnot that are designed to fit in a 223 in the magazine. They're ballistically like not even in the same category as the 80s and 88s, the ELDs and VLDs. But at normal hunting ranges, like on stuff that I don't want to see like massive trauma, I might neuter that down a little bit because those bullets will penetrate really well too. So,
that sounds like. So I'm sure you're probably going to hand load that ammo and bump the pressure up on it a little bit.
Yep.
Yeah. You're probably going to take a longer shot with it on the sheep than you did on the moose too. Then.
Probably. I mean, the longest shot I've ever taken on a sheep was 465, I think. Nope. I missed one that was longer, and I thus have not shot anymore at that. But, I mean, most of the time I just don't have the need for shooting that far, and which is like the 22 Creedmoor, 22 ARC argument. Like, you get some more velocity, but there's not like, people will frame it like it has so much more horsepower. Really, you just have a couple hundred yards more of useful velocity window. I think as long as you're, at least my kind of, the line I'm drawing is I typically with these 22s, like I'm looking for 2,000 feet per second or faster impact velocity. And like, is 3,000 going to do more damage with one of those bullets? Yeah. But like 2,000 should be pretty impressive too.
Well, that sounds like you're going to have a good sheep rifle once you get that thing all put together. And I'm interested to hear how it turns out for you next year. So maybe you and I talk again in a year or so after sheep season. Hopefully it goes a little better for you next year than it did this year. Yeah.
No, that's hunting, man. So hopefully it does. And I imagine something might come up between now and then, but hopefully it's not that long before I talk to you again. But if it is,
tell people where they can learn more about you and see what you're up to.
So most of this stuff I'm writing on, I'm a staff writer for Outdoor Life. So outdoorlife.com, you can find stuff. Most of the stuff I do is gun reviews and gun testing and stuff for Outdoor Life. We've got this moose video where I kind of break down the whole deal on YouTube, on Outdoor Life's YouTube channel. And then I have my own podcast called Tundra Talk, which is just kind of an Alaskan hunting and mischief podcast. So, that's all.
All right.
All the platforms.
Well, good deal. Well, Tyler, it was great talking to you today. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Okay. I hope you enjoyed that. Tyler is not afraid to experiment out there after doing some research ahead of time to make sure that he has a reasonable chance of getting the results that he wants. And he is also not afraid to show his work. Now, like we mentioned, the 22 ARC and the 22 Creedmoor with those new 80 and 88 grain bullets are definitely not your granddaddy's 22 centerfires. That does not mean they're perfect or that you should hunt with them, but I do think you should not dismiss them out of hand either for use on big game. Now, like I said at the beginning, this is one of those episodes where we challenge some deeply held orthodoxies some people have. Now, I probably would use something bigger myself on an Alaska moose hunt, but I am 100% sold on the 22 ARC for deer size game in particular, with the right bullets, of course. I will definitely be using the 22 ARC on some hogs where I live at the first chance I get. As always, I will be sure to report the details back to you if and when that happens, and the same is also true for Tyler with the 22 ARC for sheep next year if things work out and he connects on a sheep with it. Now, Tyler was previously on the show in episode 316 talking about hunting Dall sheep, and in episode 282 where he talks about killing that grizzly bear with the 6.5 Creedmoor. Both are great shows. Check them out if you haven't already done so. Also, be sure to check out Tyler's show, the Tundra Talk Podcast, and his Instagram account. I will also put a link in the show notes to the article he wrote for Outdoor Life about killing the moose with the 22 ARC and the video he made for Outdoor Life's YouTube channel talking about this thing. So you can see some of the video involved in it, see some of the pictures of the things we were discussing in the podcast today. Also, do not forget to sign up at thebiggamehuntingblog.com/giveaway to enter the drawing for the Axle Tracker Ear Pro. Remember, you can make your dream hunt turn into a reality, and we can help. Thanks for listening. We'll see you back here next time on the Big Game Hunting Podcast.
This show may be over, but we have plenty more for you on our website. For more information on today's topic, as well as lots of other useful hunting resources, head over to thebiggamehuntingblog.com. We look forward to having you back for the next episode. But until then, happy hunting.
Picture this. You're not just fixing cars, you're living your passion every day. At Cox, you'll work on a diverse range of automobiles. Surrounded by a team of friendly, like-minded individuals, you'll enjoy great pay and benefits. Ready to make this a reality? At Cox, we're recruiting auto and diesel techs to join our Mannheim and Fleet Services teams. Learn, grow, and fine-tune your career as a technician at Cox. Find out more at cox.career/autotech.